Hi, welcome to the March 12th, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. We'll get started here in just a couple minutes. I'm going to do a quick audio test, make sure everything is coming through okay. Hi, welcome. Okay, so we will get started here in just a couple of minutes. My name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the Hangout or live stream today. So we'll get started in a couple of minutes as people get logged in. If you have not attended a Club Cubase live stream before, how it works is you could submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you could ask questions in the live chat field. So, and once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America as a product specialist for Steinberg products. So I'll be the host for the Hangout today. I'm based in the United States, and we will. So I'm based in the United States in Alexandria, Virginia. So we will get started in just a couple minutes. So if you want to, while people are getting logged in, for those people that are getting logged in, if you want to introduce yourself, I'm seeing maybe a little bit of confusion with it might be an hour off just in some of the comments. So it could be with daylight savings time. Sometimes it switches in different countries on different weekends. So I think we're going into our daylight saving times in the United States, but we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. So let's go ahead and just a couple little notes. So tomorrow at noon Eastern, which is 1 hour earlier from today, we'll be doing a Club Cubase live stream. So this will be noon Eastern in the United States time. So it's like 23 hours from now. So we will go ahead, and this way we could have people that maybe have obligations during the week, and we could go for a couple hours tomorrow for those of us that want to meet some of the other participants in the Hangout. So we can go ahead and do that. So if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I will send you the Zoom invite link, and I'll try to put it in one of the comments in the live chat for today's Hangout that you could use as a reference. So that will be on March 13th, starting at 12 noon on U.S. Eastern time. So there could be an hour difference if there's daylight saving times that are changing in other countries, because we haven't changed in the United States yet, but I believe we will be doing it coming up in on this Sunday night. But we'll go ahead and get started in just a couple minutes. So let's go ahead and see who is on the Hangouts. Okay, so we see Sir Robert from Atlanta. We see Sable Winters from Bay Area. We have Jan from Cubase Index. So if you want to search for different topics that have been covered on Hangouts, Jan has been kind enough and gracious enough to create a website for that. Okay, so we have Uno from Finland. All right, so we have Jazz Dude. I believe he's in Heidelberg, Germany. We have Robbie Bowling from Dallas. Okay, we have John Costigan from Kenosha. All right, we have Soren from Sweden, Millard Brown in Pennsylvania, just outside Philadelphia. All right, so we have Ace Amadeus from Texas. All right, so we have Edward from Chicago. All right, so we have Matt from London. We get some more people getting logged in. So just a couple other little ground rules. My family is at home while I'm doing this. I'm doing this from home, so there may be an interruption. My son has his virtual learning at home today, so I may have to help him out with something once his school is done, or he'll come down and tell me his weekend is started. Well, he still have many hours to go. and you may hear my wife working above me, so I'll apologize for any interruptions that we may have. The ability for people to ask questions will far exceed the ability of me answering them in real time. So if you ask a question and you don't get an immediate response, it could be that I'm just catching up. So it could take a little while to catch up. But we'll try to go through all the questions in chronological order. My chat field may jump on me if there's so many questions, I may jump, and periodically I may lose a couple of questions. So, but we'll try to avoid that. As you ask questions, it's sometimes helpful if you could indicate if you have which version of Cubase that you're running, as well as, what platform. So you can say I'm running, Cubase 11 Pro on Mac. I'm running, or I'm running Cubase Elements 10 on PC. So, all right, just getting some messages coming in. So just got a text from Chuck Ainley. So solution I was able to help him out with yesterday worked out for him on a record. I think he was telling me he was just doing Nancy Wilson of Heart down at Muscle Shoal Studio recently. So it's good to be Chuck Ainley. Okay, so we'll get a couple more people logged in, and let's see who else is on. All right, so we see Sub 403 from British Columbia. We have Milena from Brewster, New York. All right, so all right, and if you want to, all right, so we have Redwan from Dubai. All right, and we have Alex Morgan from LA. All right, you may be able to hear my son getting a bit crazy above me. All right, so we'll wait just a couple more minutes and get started here. So if you want to go ahead and ask questions, we could go ahead and start that in the chat field. Let's go ahead and see if we get started. Okay, so a question from Ace Amadeus. Hi, Greg. Hope you are doing well using Cubase 10.5. Could you please suggest tips on how to achieve maximum loudness without getting distortion in the final mixdown of all tracks in a project? So, it's kind of the ever-present question that people always try to do, is to have kind of the loudest tracks possible. But let's just say if I wanted to, just remove this track. But let's say if I have tracks that are, say, something like this. This is a track from my friend and colleague Dom Cicchetti. So we'll just play just a little bit of this, and we'll just wait for the drums to kick in here. So, what a lot of people do is run, different multi-band, compressors and dynamics and limiters on the main bus here. So let's say if I just wanted to take this particular track and I'll adjust my control room down. And let me just check my audio routing here. All right, and just gonna get in my control room one more time, make sure. All right, so let's say if I have this, so, one thing that people will do is often just kind of run it through different plugins on the final stage. So if you go to like your dynamics, I could come over here to like a maximizer. And then we could put this on even. So if I just wanted to bypass this plugin or deactivate it. So let's say if I wanted to just kind of, so running like a maximizer or limiter is a pretty common technique for this. One thing that a lot of people just kind of forget is if I wanted to just take a little portion, I'll just do just a small portion of this and I'll do an audio mix down of this particular section. And I won't do the whole thing just for time's sake. But as we wanted to come over here, I could do my audio mix down. Excuse me. And I will choose just to do a stereo mix down. And let's add it to the queue. And I want to, after the export, I'll just put it into an audio track. So we'll just export this. It's going to place this file directly into the project window. And so a lot of times when people get this, one thing that, that people often kind of forget to do is to just select the particular file. And if you see like the amplitude is down, you could also come and go to your audio to processing. So we'll go to processes and then just choose normalize. So at this point, you could say, okay, I want this to be at a specific loudness unit. So if I was doing broadcast, I may want it to be minus 23 LUFS, or we could just say, make it minus 1 dB. And at that point, it could automatically process that file so that it will, be kind of the maximum gain that way. So you could just take kind of the final file and kind of normalize it as well. And if you do this with the loudness meters, that way that the particular file, so we could have it, maybe go from there, or we could just kind of look at the amplitude of the particular audio file, and then that would be, louder of that. I'll just solo this. If I wanted to undo that, so depending on the file, so that's another thing that you could do. So you could do kind of your master effects processing, or just do running like a limiter or a maximizer plugin, or just coming to the final stage and doing kind of some offline processes with that. All right, so I see Jazz Dude's kind enough to mention that there is a update. So if you're still on 10.5.2 for Mac and PC for Cubase, that this week the 10.53 was released. So it's a lot of the maintenance stuff that kind of that were fixed in the 11.x generation for features that are applicable for 10.5 generation. So with that, so make sure if you're still running Cubase 10.5 that you get to 10.53. So that way you have kind of the latest fixes for that. So I think it's great that Steinberg will still update the previous versions of software after releasing a new generation. So that's a great thing to do for them. All right. Also, just on some other new things, there's a new Pad Shop 2 expansion released, Apollo by Dom Segalis, who does lots of wonderful videos for Cubase. So if you're looking for some new, very kind of atmospheric and soundtracky type of sounds, it's a wonderful library. And also the Imagineer by Online Music Foundry. So those are some, and that Gary, who's involved with that, he just released a whole new bank of like truly wonderful presets for retro log, sounds that you didn't think would be possible in that synthesizer. It's a really wonderful set. So check out some of those new releases as well. All right. Okay, my chat field just jumped on me. All right. All right, so we see that sub 403 was hospitalized because of a prescription error. We're glad you're doing okay and glad to have you back. So we missed you while you're gone. So. Okay, so we have a question, Greg. Is there a preference / way setting on a knit track so that new MIDI parts have expression and modulation data written on them, so they have a starting point, a note, etc.? Cubase 10 Pro. So a lot of people, when they're working with this, may have like a template. I could show you kind of a way that a lot of people do this. So I'll just do a new project. And I will just come right over here. So let's say if I add a MIDI track. So you could always start with or I'll just start with an instrument track rather. So if you always want to have like a particular setting set for values, like, you mentioned, so you have expression and mod kind of starting at specific points. So there's a MIDI plugin. So if we go to like your MIDI inserts, and you could just come over here to MIDI control. So you could say, okay, on modulation, I want the value to start at 100. And let's say on expression, I want it to start at a value of 80. So at this point, once that part plays, those particular values will be kind of the default state. So you could save this. Let me see if we can save it as a preset. So so what a lot of people will do is, let's see if this is saved in a track preset. Okay, so I'm going to come here and learn how to type better. Sorry. All right, so I'm going to just load this particular track preset, and then we can see that those values from this particular MIDI plugin. So as soon as you hit play, it will automatically transmit the defined modulation expression. So you could just save that as a particular, track preset. Or I know many composers that always want to start with a set known starting point will just have this kind of written in directly on in the MIDI inserts, and we'll just have it as part of their template. Okay. All right, so we have Sound Foundry Studios saying hello from the southernmost town in Canada. All right. Sorry, someone's mowing grass outside my window. Okay, so question: if I'm using send, say rev first, then delay, reverb first, then delay, does the reverb go through the delay? If not, what's the best way to achieve this? All right, so if we have, let's say a audio track here, and on this audio track, I'm going to go to send, and let's say if I add a reverb. Okay, and I wanted to now add a delay. Oh, let me just get rid of that quickly. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's say we'll just do this as our mono delay. So if we have, so when we have the audio and it's going through this particular channel, you know, it's going to basically send these out in parallel. So it doesn't necessarily send the reverb to the delay or the delay into the reverb. So it doesn't cascade it, but the signal kind of goes through these in parallel to the different effects channel returns and then out to the output. If I wanted to feed, let's say, the delay into a reverb instead, what I could do is just go to my effects return channel. So let's say I wanted the, I could go to my delay. And, you know, when we look at our effects return channels, we could think of this as, you know, these will just be, the effects are just kind of routed as inserts. So now I could have my delay, if I wanted to feed it into a reverb, this one send can now, you know, so as we do this, this would go through, you know, without having to have it in parallel. I could then send this to this send, and this send has the delay, and we could edit, you know, the amount of the mix here, and this delay then feeds into the reverb. So that way, if you wanted to, you know, or if you wanted to just, you know, swap the order, have the reverb delayed. So you could do stuff like that. So if you wanted to have the effects cascaded and kind of go more kind of, you know, in like a particular path, just, you know, go to the effects channel return, and you could add up to 16 different effects, all accessible through one send that we would see here for the particular channel. So this would feed all 16 channels on the effects channel it's being, or group that's being sent to. All right, great to see Taylor from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to extend the tail of offline processing like reverb or delay beyond the end of a clip? So let's go ahead and take a look at that. I will just come over here and okay, so we will just go ahead and solo just this effect.
What dimension am I in?
Okay, so if I wanted to apply direct offline processing to this, a lot of times what people will run into is I'll come over here and let's add a plugin like a long delay. So I'll just set my feedback up here. So now as we do this,
what dimension am I in?
and we can notice that it's going to just kind of cut off a bit unnaturally, kind of at the original length. So now we want to listen to
what dimension am I in?
So I'll just go ahead and I'll remove this processing.
What dimension am I in?
So if I wanted to cascade longer, that's why we have where you could extend the process range, or you could add the tail. So let's say if I wanted to add the tail, I go to the plugins, and if we watch the length of this, and I'll just kind of move the cursor to the end of that particular file, I'll just put that delay on again. Let's set the feedback really high. You can see that the length of that particular part has now extended, and I have it set to 1.4 milliseconds. So now as we listen to it,
what dimension am I in?
so you could just have the tail just done directly here. So just within the offline processing, you could just make that adjustment and have it go beyond the length of the particular part. Okay, so just see a question. Hello, how are you? My Cubase Element 11 Mac Pro not loaded songs. All right, so I'm not sure if I understand. So it says, hello, how are you? My Cubase Element 11 on Mac Pro not loaded songs. So I'm not sure if it's not loading up your songs that you're using or what. Maybe I think it's from Delian Williams. Maybe if you could maybe ask the question in our way. Yeah, I'm sorry if I don't understand. Okay, so question, when comping, if I do remove all unused media, what happens to all the takes? Will all the takes still be left? Thanks, Jan. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. I will come over here. I'm just going to assign this to a group, and I'll just put this into like a cycle recording. All right, so we're going to route this track. I won't monitor, but let's go ahead and just do a quick cycle record here.
What dimension am I in? What dimension am I in? What dimension am I in? What dimension am I?
All right, let me just check my routing on this. I'm just going to route this out to the group.
In? What dimension am I in? What dimension am I in?
Okay, so let's say I just want to do a quick recording. I'll do just some cycle. Okay, so say we'll just have like take 4 going on. All right, hang on. I'll just make it so we could hear it, so I won't arm this for record. Sorry about that.
What dimension am I in? What dimension am I in? What dimension am I in?
All right, we'll do one more pass.
What dimension am I in? What?
Okay, so now I will go ahead and look at this in our lanes. So I will go ahead and just do a quick horrible comp take here. Okay, so now let's say if I go to my media menu, and remove unused media. So I think that these segments will still remain because basically this is one long recording that's been, has regions built in it. So that's why we kind of see, but it's this one recording. But if we chose, so that audio file, since it's still in use, but when we do a backup project, we have the option, and I will just, but here you have the part where you could choose to minimize audio files. So that would get rid of the unused regions. And I think, let's just take a quick look. If I wanted to come here, if there was a minimize audio file. So if I have the file selected here, you could choose to minimize file. So you could do it like that, but since it's generally a cycle recording, even though it looks like they're separate, distinct recordings, there's actually one recording that's long. So if I just drag that one recording out, we could see each of the takes, but each of the regions has just kind of been placed. So that file is being used, but you could minimize it, or as you're archiving, choose to minimize the files, and that will get rid of the unused parts. Okay, so question. Hi, I have a problem. Hopefully someone can help me. When I try to load a sampler track, Cubase 11, it crashes. If I start it with all third-party plugins disabled, it works, but not otherwise. So I would try, I haven't had any problems ever doing, using sampler tracks. So if I wanted to come here and just drag files in, it's no problem. So probably if you're saying if you started with the third-party plugins disabled, it works, but not otherwise. I would try to, maybe activate particular plugins at a time and see if you could find a culprit. One other thing to do is as you start Cubase, especially if you're maybe on a Windows platform, if you right click and maybe choose to run as administrator. But I wonder if if it's a third-party plugin that's kind of causing it, you may be able to isolate it a little bit by loading up a certain set of plugins and maybe removing the plugins or taking and if you have any VST, any 32-bit plugins are being bridged, I may look there first and see if it's working. But so I would try to run Cubase as an administrator and see if that makes a difference. So and try to isolate it to see if you could find one particular plugin that's causing it to crash. But generally by default I haven't had that happen. Okay, so all right, so we had a question from Tanmay, kind of further discussion last week about creating just a quick Midi file to see everything. All right, so so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just set up my left and right locators, and I will export this as a Midi file. So Tammy wanted all 16 parts to be in one particular track. Okay, so we'll export it as a type 0 MIDI file. Okay, so I'm going to import, and we'll choose our MIDI file here. So there's our TAM-A4 MIDI. I'll open it into a new project, and now if I double click, we could see all 16 MIDI channels on one part. But, you know, and you say, and this was because, so I won't save that for now, but it says it helps me in sound design by giving me an idea what the overall main sound of the track is going to be, which goes well with all the chords and melodies. So I'm, you know, from seeing that, you know, again, each MIDI track can only be sent to one separate MIDI port. But, you know, so I think, and, you know, maybe if you could tell me what, when we look at this in, let's say, our key editor, so I'll just look at, I'm just going to select all the parts, let's say in the Brandenburg Concerto here. And let's look at it in the key editor, and I'm going to just colorize by part. That, you know, here I could see all of my parts and be able to edit them against each other. And, you know, if you wanted to, you could actually, you know, see the chords as well. So I'll just activate this quickly. All right, so let's say if I wanted to come here, so, you know, if I wanted to see what was going on harmonically, what was going on chord-wise, I can see the chords at top here. So I know lots of composers, you know, who just kind of live and die in this, you know, particular viewing multiple parts. I know like Hans Zimmer, this is like his favorite part of Cubase, that he could have, you know, his whole orchestra and be able to kind of, you know, visualize it on a macro level, and be able to see all the parts. And then when you wanted to edit a particular part, you could just click on it, and then that would be your particular instrument. Or you could just say, okay, now I just wanted to edit my bass, you know. And you could, you know, cycle between these different editors here to make it the active part. So, so I'm not sure what you get by, you know, having it all in one single part or viewing multiple parts within a single editor. So, but, you know, you can try doing it as exporting as a type 0 MIDI file. I just have my left and right locators set to the same spot in Tuesday's Hangout. So, all right. Great to see Pablo on the Hangout. My favorite Spanish drummer. All right. All right, just my chat field jumped on me, so let me just scroll back. All right, great to see JVI on Hangout. So we have a question. Can I use the same license to install the software on 2 machines, 1 PC and 1 Mac? So if you have the USB e-licenser, you could, you know, install that on 100 different computers. If you go to your friend's house, you know, you go to the studio, you can install and just connect your USB e-licenser, and so that's what holds your license. But if you're running like Cubase Elements, AI, LE, and you're using the soft e-licenser, That's kind of tied to the particular machine. But if it's just, you could have that license on a USB e-licenser and then just simply move it to whatever machine you want to without any worries. All right. So seeing a request for a Zoom meetup, so I'll send that out after. So again, if you want to be on the Zoom meeting tomorrow, and we'll do it 12 noon Eastern, U.S. Eastern time. So, and maybe check if you have on your phone or an app, because it could be daylight saving times. It's always tricky this time of year when we have international conference calls and certain countries are on daylight savings times before others. I remember one time traveling through Europe, I flew over. It was daylight saving time in England on my way out. The morning I left, it was daylight saving time in Germany, and a week after it was daylight saving time in America. So it was tricky to make sure I got the right times for all my flights. All right, so we see Millard Brown. He got the Apollo and Imagineer yesterday. All right, so just see a comment from Robbie Bowling. While I've moved to Pro 11, still have 10.5, and I tend to hedge my bets, so I did the update. So okay, so we have a question. Ignore if this is a dumb question. There's no dumb questions. I'm new to Cubase. I have a question. Basically, what control room does? What does control room do? If I turned it on, media bay will go silence. Thanks. So control room allows you to have kind of a different stage of the mixer. So let's say if I wanted to jump back to this project, and a lot of times when we see people that are working on a particular project, they may, get into some different aspects where as they're working, and let's say they're in their mix console, a lot of people have powered studio monitors, and they treat their master volume meter as kind of their monitoring volume. So, but this actually affects kind of the gain structure of the mix. So you can see that as I drop, this is kind of what my final mix output is here. So when I do this, so if I wanted to adjust the volume of what's being monitored, what this allows me to do is to come right over here, and I could adjust the monitoring volume without affecting the gain structure. So if we look at my master fader, as I adjust, it's going to only play. It's still not affecting the gain structure, but this is just my monitoring level. We could also have this, I could set it to known volume levels. We could also just dim it. Like, someone calls you, you could just hit one button. At this point, there's also different downmix presets. So if I want to listen to this, to see how this is folding down in mono or stereo, you could do that. Now, another thing that's really handy is we could just come over here and say, okay, I just want it to dim. And so if I solo a track, all the other tracks will get kind of silenced and muted, but I could also just put this into listen mode. Now the other tracks are still present, but just softer. So let's say as we're here. So I could hear it in context, and I could just do a listen dim amount. And instead of the air tracks being muted, we could kind of hear it in context. Now, certain things will also go through the media bay. So if I wanted to, let's say, scrub my audio, I could just kind of come here. This gets routed through like the listen bus and not through a particular channel. And when we go to audition loops, so now that we're here, I could just say, okay, I wanted to listen to and preview my different loops. Since these aren't assigned to a particular channel, they get routed through kind of the audition bus or listen bus, if you will. So at that point, we could hear those particular changes. Now, if we have more than one set of computer speakers, monitors that we're listening to, the media bay is also great at this because we could have multiple speaker configurations and we could just switch between our different speakers. So if I could just click here, I could say, oh, I have my Yamaha HS7s, and now I wanted to go to JBLs or to Genelecs or, Monitor 4. So instead of having to have a piece of hardware, we could take the inputs and outputs of our audio interface, and we could take, in this case for speakers, we could take the outputs connected to our monitors, our speaker monitors, and be able to just seamlessly switch without having to buy another piece of hardware, which will just color the signal. So you could do that. And then while you're tracking the media, the control room will also allow you to have kind of separate headphone mixes. So if you wanted to create kind of a more me type of headphone mix, you could do that quite easily just using the control room. So that's kind of a quick rundown and stuff. Plus you could also, like, while you're tracking, you could define an input so that if you're tracking and you have people like spread throughout the studio, you could hit the talk back and your microphone could just say, all right, so, let's try that take again. And everyone could be listening to that in your headphones. So you could configure even a talk back. So a number of different uses for the control room, but it's a really handy thing, and it's something that differentiates a lot of large consoles from other large consoles, is being able to have this type of functionality. Hi, Greg. So we have a question from Ace on those new Steinberg library releases for Pad Shop or Hallian. So yeah, for the ones I mentioned for Pad Shop and Retrolog, can they be used license free to create original music for commercial projects? Certainly, yeah. There's no problem with that. So you could definitely do that. All of the content that we get with Steinberg is set up that way because in the past, I've seen some companies where they get dinged afterwards. I had a friend who had a pretty significant hit and used a loop from a program, and they didn't have clearance for it, and he got sued for it and had to give a bunch of money up because of the company. So that has happened in the past. I think even at one point there was I think if I remember the story right, there used to be like expansion cards for some of the Roland kind of romplers, like, the 1080s, and at one point they released rack mount versions of just the expansion cards. And I think it was on an Alanis Morissette song. Someone had used a loop from that, and it got dinged, and they had to, the story I heard was they had to stop selling the particular unit as a result of that. So all the content that you have with Cubase is, royalty free, so you could use it in your original compositions without any worry or issues. Okay, so how to select all events and tracks with one click. So if you just hold down Shift, I think, and double click, that will select all of your events. If we have a number of MIDI tracks, so say if I have MIDI information here. All right, I'll go. All right, so let's say I have this in my MIDI part. I think even just holding down Shift, and you could select all of the notes on that particular key from there, but you could also just, come over here and there's select all, just even just a, Control or Command A would select all of the events. But, and there's also, like, let's say there's a number of guitar parts here, and if I wanted to select all these on the project window, I think you could just come over here, select all on tracks or all unselected tracks. So at this point, I could just come right over here, go to edit to select, and there's keyboard shortcuts for this. Where you say, all unselected tracks, and then all those particular events are selected for you. All right, great to see Captainergy Music on Hangout. Hope you're doing well. All right, so we have a question. Hello, does Cubase 5 Artist capable of getting chords from audio track from Clearwater, Florida? So the Cubase Artist 5 doesn't do that. So, realize that Cubase Artist 5 is probably 11 or 12 years old now as well. So, all right, so I see from Tanmay, how to make scroll sensitive, low within Cubase app. When I'm within Cubase, the scroll becomes super sensitive, and this only happens with Cubase 10.5, not any other app. So I think, like, as I'm just using my scroll wheel here, so I'm going, vertically this way. If I'm, going horizontally, it's kind of about the same. Sometimes it could also depend upon, your zoom factor, maybe. But, as I kind of just do this, let's say if I'm, zooming in and out, it seems pretty consistent to me. So let's say if I zoom, that's consistent. I go up. So I go vertically, horizontally, and I'm just using a little, $20 mouse that works on 3 computers at once. So just a generic mouse. So it seems pretty consistent to me with that. So I know that some people, and there's a lot of issues with like the Mac, Apple's Magic Mouse. Some of the sensitivity stuff could be weird, and there's problems with like the Apple Magic Mouse in many programs. So it's not just a Cubase thing, so if you're using a Magic Mouse, try, spend $12 and get a Logitech and see if that makes a difference for you. But there's lots of people have issues with the Magic Mouse. I can't stand using it. I really dislike that one particular mouse. And I've had people that, as soon as they switch to like a really inexpensive Logitech, stuff has just worked really well. So let us know what mouse you're using. Okay, so question, is there a way to revert audio tracks after bounce selection? Sometimes I make fade mistakes and would like to get the original track back. All right, so let's go ahead and try it. Okay. So let's say if I'll just come here. I have this particular audio file. I'll activate the project. And I'll make it just a little more colorful so it's prettier for us. All right, so I've now will just do, let's say, a fade in and a fade out, and I'll bounce selection. Okay, so I think if we wanted to go back, so right there, I just undid it, and it just showed up in, with, so just doing an undo has done that. Now, if I wanted to come over here, let's say if we go to our pool window, I'll just do this to a new file quickly and give it a particular name so we could trace it here. But just the standard undo will work.
I'm too tired.
Okay, so I'm gonna come here. All right, so I'll bounce it and then I'll make this into its own separate file. Okay, so now we'll look in our pool window. Okay, so here's our bounce replace test file. And I will go ahead and just put in fade ins and fade outs here. And I'll bounce the selection again. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and replay. So now I do this, we don't see the fade handles, but let's go ahead and look in the pool. So you can see that this is the bounced file, and this is probably, so we can see that this has the fade in and fade out, but the original file is just, so the working file will just be renamed like 01. You still have the original file, and we can see that this is the file that's being used. So we can see that this is being used once in the project and this isn't. So the original file, if it's like after you saved and you wanted to go back, you could just see the original file in the project where there's no fades on it. But if I wanted to, again, come over here, and if I take this particular audio file, and we can see that this will have, I'll make this just a bit larger to make it more obvious so that we could see the fades applied to this one. So the original file is always going to be in the pool, and the the one you did, the bounce selection, will be just simply renamed with like a 01 extension. So you could just drag it in, and if you wanted to just go back to where it was, and if you have that used multiple times, you could take that file, hold down the shift key, and like while you drag it in, so say if I open up the pool, so drag this in, let's see if this works. So yeah, and you could just drag it right into the same spot as that particular file. So give that a shot. So when you do the bounce selection, it's going to rename that file with the 01, and the original one will still be in a pool that you could access. And as Jazz Dude mentions, you could just do it through the direct offline processing as well. Thanks for all the great questions. If you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that as well. So question, is it possible to change the default MIDI port in setup to not be Windows MIDI Microsoft GS Wavetable synth when inserting a new MIDI track? So I think, so that is the onboard soft synth that's on most most audio interfaces. So it may show up first, but I think if we go to Studio Setup and you go to MIDI port setup, that you could just kind of come over here. I would see if you could just make it invisible. So I think you have a visibility setting here, and then try just to make that particular port visible or invisible. So, so that's what I would try to do, and then it may not show up as the first choice. But sometimes, when we do the MIDI, it's kind of goes by what the computer's operating system puts out, because we tie into the MIDI timing engines for Windows and Mac OS. So it could be kind of predetermined sometimes by the operating system. But try just simply, making it invisible, and then I think it may stop that from showing up. Okay, so let me just open up our project for our next question here. Okay, so question, I'd like to export individual tracks that include their entire routing, including master plus groups, but when I select that option, it exports some of the tracks as a master stereo mix. So when you do this, and this is one of the new things that was kind of added in version 11. So let's say if I wanted to take all of my drums here, and I'm going to route it through a group channel that's going to have like processing on it. So I'll just take all my drums, route it to a stereo group. And so say as we're doing this, I'm just going to squash our drums. So let's say I just wanted to. And let's say I just want to put like a bit of verb on my guitars. So I'll add an effects channel track. Okay, so I have groups, I have a group effect, I have sends. So if I wanted to export, and this is one of the new things that was kind of found in Cubase 11. Now when I come over here to my export audio mix down, we could choose so we want to make this multiple to kind of start off with. And at this point, we'll just say I could have my groups be rendered independently, my effects channels, but I could also just take all of my audio channels, and under the effects section, we could choose to export the master, group, and sends. And now all of the effects processing of EQ on the groups, all of the kind of the full channel process will now be embedded directly into the audio files themselves. So when you make the individual stems, all of the processing throughout the entire signal flow. So if I put like a magneto tape saturation plugin on my master bus, that would be included, and the effect of that would be included on all of the tracks. So make sure that you have, and this is in version 11. This is one of the new things with the job cues export. We can just go to effects and just choose master, groups, and sends. And at that point, that would allow you to do all of the processing as you want. Okay, so question, what's the best way to remove all unwanted takes and unused audio in a pool just to keep what I have in the workspace? All right. So I'll just create a new project here to show this. All right. So we'll be creative with our names and call it audio 1 through 5. All right, so I'm going to put these into a quick folder track so we can just arm that. So let's say I'm now recording just audio here. All right, and let's say now I wanted to do another pass. Okay, we'll do a third pass. All right, and let's say we now just want to do one particular track. I'll add one audio track. And now I'll just arm this one, and let's say I wanted to do just some quick, like a quick cycle record mode. All right, let me put it in cycle this time. It would be helpful. Sorry. Okay, so we'll do a couple passes here. And again, remember that this, even when we do multiple passes, this will be one audio file that's broken down into regions. Okay, so we have that. And let's say I now want to erase files. All right, so we should have 16 files in our in the pool. So we have audio, 0, 1. So we could have all of our different takes. So at this point, if I wanted to just come here, just say remove unused media, we could move it to the trash or remove it from the pool. So at this point, we could just say remove unused media for the project and let's say remove from the pool. And then those particular files you can just be placed directly into the trash. We could empty the trash, and that way you could get rid of the unused files directly in the project pretty easily. So I see from Ali, guys, do we have Zoom today? So we're going to do tomorrow at noon Eastern. So I think I sent you the Zoom link, if memory serves me right. So, and that's noon Eastern in the United States. And I realize that there's probably discrepancies with daylight saving time. So just so you may want to just check, but it should be in your invite. And if you don't have an invite, please send me an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de, and I'll try to put it in the comments field of the Hangout or the live stream from today, later tonight as well. Okay. Let's see. Hi, Greg, everyone. I have a question. Is there a way to edit multiple CCs across multiple MIDI tracks at once, or is there only a way to copy and paste manually? Thanks. So right now, the best way to do it is to manually copy paste. What I see a lot of other people will do is, let's say, if, we just have, so let's say if I have a number of instrument tracks and I have these so I'll just put these into a folder. What I see a lot of people also do, instead of like copying everything, they may just, put all of the tracks into record and then just record like your modulation data. So I'm just moving my mod wheel. So as we look at this, let me just, you can see all of my modulation. So, I know some people that will painstakingly copy and paste, and some people will just select all the tracks and just like for the strings, move like your modulation wheel or expression wheel and just record that data. And you could record that CC data across multiple tracks. So, or copy and paste it. So. All right. Okay, my chat field just jumped on me. Let me just scroll back. Okay, from Ace Amadeus, Greg, could you please give an example of proper way to do routing and buses? Thanks. Okay, so we'll just jump back to, there's a number of different ways to approach it. So there's no absolute right or wrong way. So a lot of times what I do, some people will have very specific templates set up. But what I often do is, let's say if I have all my drums, and let's say if I have these outside of a folder, I'll show you one trick that a lot of people don't know. So I have all of my drums in a folder, but if I wanted to, there's a macro that's here. And what this will allow you to do is you could take selected tracks to new folder and add group channel. So I could just come here. Okay, let's call it drums. And now these will all be placed into a folder track and route it to the group track right there. So that's pretty convenient. So now I could take all of my drums and increase or decrease their volume and process them as a collective entity. So if I wanted to come here and just EQ all my drums. You could do that quite easily. Or run dynamics processing. So that's, easy ways of doing it. Now, if I wanted to send other tracks to that group, I could just take the output tab here and send it to the group. Or if I didn't want it to affect the outputs, we could go to the sends, and I could also send to a group and activate the send and set the amount of how much of that signal is being fed into the group. Now, groups could also be routed to other groups. So let's say if I had a vocal group, I had a guitar and bass group, I could come here. So I'll just right click. Another method is just saying add track, and we'll say add a group channel to the selected tracks. So now I've just added a group channel to my selected tracks. So I have my drums group and my my guitar bass group. And if I wanted to select these two groups, just hold down Control. I could add a group channel to that. And now group 3 is kind of controlling the volume of the guitars and bass, as well as my drums. And we can do this all without any fear of latency issues being introduced. And then some people may just, when you have like some of my engineers where they have, 10 channels of kick drum mics, they'll just come over here and basically mix with groups only. So, okay, I need the drums louder, I need the guitar and bass, or I wanted to see all the channels. You could do that as well. So it's a couple tips for kind of routing tracks to groups. So I hope that's helpful. So I see a question from Kai. Hey, Greg, can you tell me how you turned on the current chord displayed? All right. Hang on one second. All right. So seeing some more Zoom invite emails coming through. Thanks. We'll get those sent after the Hangout. All right. So let's say if I'm on... Let's say I'll just open up this project here. Okay, so let's say if I have the chord. So what you could do if you wanted to see like the chords for this particular kind of what's going on. If we go to the little setup window in the upper right-hand corner, you could see kind of the I think it's called the status line. And then once you have the status line, you could just see the chords. Of the piano just indicated right there. I could also take this piano part, and if I wanted to just go to my project menu and go to chord track, I could say, let's create chord symbols. That will make a chord track for the piano part. And with version 11, one of the great additions was the ability of global tracks. And now I could see the chord track directly within the editor as well. So you get an idea of exactly where the chords are happening. So it can make editing much easier. So that's a couple of different ways where you can see the chord tracks. Kai? Okay, so I just see a question. Can notes be recorded at one track with different colors? Yeah, there's lots of different color options. So let's say... Let me just... All right, so let's say if I wanted to record directly within the editor. So let's say if I come, I'll just kind of create a blank part here. Okay, so I'm just going to record within the editor, and we could choose to colorize based on pitch or velocity. So if I wanted every pitch to just be colorized, I will come here and let's go ahead and just record. All right, so now. And now each of the pitches could be based on color, or you could colorize based on MIDI channel, based on the part, based on the sound slot or the voice, or based on velocity. So, or if what notes are within the particular chord or scale that you want. So that's how you could choose to kind of the criteria for how it's colorized. I think it defaults to velocity. So if you have like a really loud velocity, the note turns more red. And if you turn the velocity very soft, it gets bluer. So that's always kind of a good indication for a lot of editing. If you just kind of flub the note and your finger got a little lazy, that you could do that. Or if you want every single pitch to be its own color, you could do that as well. Okay, so to see, can I like loop record on one track and each loop with different note colors? Let's give it a shot. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to come over here to my MIDI record mode, and I'm going to just have it do new parts. And I'll just put it into... All right, so I'm just going to put this into record. All right, so now if I wanted to look at these, we'll just kind of blow this up. So you could do it, if you have these automatic. I think that when we go into our editors here, so let's say, let me just switch my record mode in cycle to, I'll just do stacked. Sorry. Okay, so now it's kind of based on, I think that these would all be kind of the same colors, but depending, I think that the colors here are going to be kind of global for all of the lanes. But let me see if I wanted to just change the color for each of the parts. So let's see if that's going to be global as well. So I will select this. Let's make that one. Yeah, so all of the same ones are going to be, I don't know a way to do that, but let's go ahead and, now that they're all on separate tracks, we'll go into our editor, and I have this, so it looks like if we have this set per part, that each of those could be independent there. You could also separate it by pitch, but you could try setting this by part as well, and that might give you independent colors. So give that a shot. Okay, just reading through comments. Okay, so we see question: is there a way to record scrub and use it as a turntable scratcher? So as Jazz Dude mentioned right underneath, you could try the loop mash effect, but let's go ahead and give it a shot here. All right, let's do this a new project because that tempo's in 6/8. Okay, so let's say I'm going to route this to a particular audio. I'm going to route it to a group. Okay, so let's just say this is playing. All right, so I'm going to switch to my scrubbing tool. This may stop the playback as we do it. Yeah. So I think probably the best way, because as we do this, the position may move. Let me see if I could maybe get a preference to see if that. Think as soon as I go back to scrub that the playhead position might move. So probably the easiest way, let me just, I'll just take one last scour through preferences. So I think probably the easiest way for this would just be to, as Jazz Dude mentioned, just using one of the plugins, and you can find this under Other and just go to Loop Mash. So let's say if I'm here, and we can set kind of the timing of this. So if you want to do, so let's say if I just want this to loop over and over again. and you could set kind of the tempo. So you have two different kind of, and these could each be set to different rhythmic values. So if you want that. Stuff like that. So, so that's probably the best way to approach it. All right. So we have Ramfree checking in, signing in from Arkansas. Great to have you on Hangout. And each of these little settings you could just trigger from a MIDI track, and you could just do it from MIDI itself. So you could actually kind of play it. All right, so just seeing, hey Greg, my Cubase 11 Pro is crashing because of quick controls, but I don't know how to delete them. Can you help me, please? All right, so if you have quick controls, probably what you need to do is go to your studio menu, to studio setup, and in here you'll see your track quick controls and VST quick controls. So probably all you need to do here is just choose these to be not connected. And then no MIDI information will get sent through the quick controls area. So just see loop mash is audio only, and this is probably with the what we just did. But I've dumped everything on one MIDI track and was hoping to separate all notes and their events. So if you needed to separate notes and events, so let's say if I have an instrument track here. So what you could do if you needed to separate those, you could just come right over here. And if you go to MIDI, choose to dissolve part, and then you could separate pitches into individual tracks if you need to. But, you know, if it's a virtual instrument, you know, you can still run the loop mash effects on it to do the scratches and processes just like that. Okay, so you see I'm thinking of purchasing Cubase. What version are you able to extract chords from an audio track? Thanks. So currently we don't have extraction from of polyphonic material from digital audio. A lot of the systems are a bit suspect that I found. So none of the versions have that, but if you have, you know, Cubase Pro, you could take any monophonic source like a vocal or bass line and have pretty highly accurate extraction into MIDI, but it's not designed to work with chords. All right, great to see Gareth on the Hangout. All right. reading through comments. So I see which is best for Cubase, Windows, or Mac OS. As far as operating systems, they run pretty much at parity. People will have their personal preferences. But probably the most compatible, for current systems, is going to be, one with an Intel processor. There's still a lot of stuff that isn't compatible with the new Mac processors, not just from Steinberg, but plugins and audio interfaces. So, so the OS, I go back and forth constantly, and I think that it's pretty much, identical. So, but, the Intel processors have far more compatibility with, a wide variety of third-party hardware and plugins. So we have a question. Is there a way to have the racks in the mix console to remain open instead of folding, unfolding when you click on them? Okay. So let's say we go to our large mix console. Sorry if I hit the... Okay, so probably the behavior now is you open up the EQs, and then if we kind of scroll up and down, we can see that. And if I open up my channel strip, that... the EQ. So by default, these will kind of, you could have multiple elements open here. So if I want to see inserts and sends, we could do that, but there may be just a little setting in here. Let me take a quick look. Okay, so maybe if you see this little breakdown, this little window, this little drop-down arrow here, I think if this is set to exclusive expanded rack, that you only see one of the racks open at a time. But if that is unchecked, so this little drop-down arrow, you see exclusive expanded racks, that now I can see my routing, my inserts, and my sends, and they could all remain open. So just where you see the word racks in the upper right-hand corner, just come here and choose to uncheck exclusive expanded rack. And that should do the trick. All right, so I just see I have a strange feeling there was a 1 hour difference wrong time again. So I think it might be, I can see that I'm kind of looking at my screen. I may have scheduled it to start like 40 minutes late, but it could be maybe a daylight savings time issue when it happens in different countries. So is there a Cubase self-clean function to get rid of unused files? Yeah, so so all you have to do is go to your media and just choose remove unused files. So you see from Jeff Sabelski, I was spoiled with using my iMac for 10 years, love my new PC build and install, but it's not silent. And that's why I use Mac for 10 years. What are the strategies for PC tower placement because of noise? I have mine kind of pretty far. My studio PC, I have it. It's not the quietest PC, but I have it in kind of far away behind a rack, and that's kind of muffled a lot of noise. In my previous studio, I had it in a closet, and I could just close the closet door, and it had enough ventilation. But there's probably also, like different fans you may be able to get. So, like there are different levels of fans for loudness, and often you could get like quiet fans for your processor. So, and Jazz Dude, who does a lot of PC configurations, is so he's saying CPU passive coolers and a huge case and power supply. So all those things can add up. Okay, on Cubasis Pro, does it have a cloud file sharing? For example, if I captured a track on the iOS version and saved, the desktop version would be able to open a file from the cloud to continue, edit, and work with it in the desktop stronger environment, or vice versa, depending on where the magic is captured. So so it's not necessarily like it's set up however you could get the files back and forth. So a lot of people use like iCloud or Dropbox to get your files. So once you have it in your, once you have it, you've captured something in Cubasis, you could just, save it to like, many people save it to a cloud solution and then just simply, import the project directly into Cubase by just, once you have the Cubasis project importer, you could choose to just import the Cubasis project right here. But it's really just, saving the file somewhere that the desktop computer could access it or be able to download it, just like that. So that's all you have to do. All right, so just see a comment from Gareth. Did a recording today. Something went voodoo, and I suddenly had about 500 layers. So maybe it was a really short cycle. All right. Okay, so I just see a question. Is there a way in Midi recording to stop recording, and when I record a new take, it would mute the last previous take? All right, so let's give it a shot. I think we could do that. So let's try one of the new Imagineer sounds here real quick. Okay, so let's say, so I'm in Retrolog, and I'm just going to all right, so I'm going to just come here and I'll start playing, let's say, okay, so I'm just holding down the C note here. All right, so now I'm going to just switch my MIDI record mode. And let's just choose to do a new part. So now I'm going to record again, and I'll just play like a major third up from that. So let's just say I'll just try something with the sound. It might be a little more obvious than this. Sorry. Maybe just one single note. Bear with me. Okay, so I'll just... Okay, so we have that one note, and let me just put this into... Okay, so I'll just come over here and hit record again. So now you're hearing the second note. And let's go back and I'll just put a low note in. So as soon as I start recording. So you're not hearing the other notes. So, and now let's see if I done this. I think that just replaced it, but let's. Okay, so if you did this in cycle record mode, so let's go ahead and try that. So we'll just come right here and we'll just choose to go to stacked. So just kind of start off low, just holding down a C note here. And now I'll just hold down the perfect fifth of that. So if I just activate the cycle, so I'll just make this a smaller cycle. So I think if you wanted it to be muted, that you may have to just kind of place it into a cycle mode and just choose the cycle mode here, which would, it's the stacked, and that would automatically just allow you to go back and forth between the different takes and have those previous ones muted. So now you could just kind of, as you're playing. You could choose to just have each of those notes be muted as you work with that. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. Bear with me while I scroll back. See, I have lots of questions in my future. Okay, just finding my place. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. So a question, whenever I copy over a MIDI clip, the automation doesn't come with the clip. Is there an option to have the automation follow all MIDI events when you copy and paste? So so I'm not sure if it's automation that's actual automation or if it's, so let's say if I have, let's say I'll just start a new project here. And let's go ahead and listen to one of the Apollo presets here for Pad Shop. All right, so let's just go through a couple presets so you guys can hear. Okay, so let's say with this patch, if I move the mod wheel, we can get that sound. All right, so I will go ahead and we'll just do a quick recording here. Okay, so let's say I've recorded my MIDI note. So we have one MIDI note and we look at, we have modulation data. So, and let's say if I want to come here and just have automation and I wanted this just to be volume automation. So I could just go ahead and let's choose to draw in some of our volume automation here. So let's say I'll just draw that in. So as we do this, so we're going to have the automation and the event here. So now when I copy it, I'll just move it over here. So it's CCs and automation, and I'll just copy the event and we'll see that the automation is carried over. And I think if you go to edit, make sure you could, if it's not, the automation isn't going over the part that you have for an edit menu, automation follows events checked. So if I uncheck that, let's make a copy. And we can see that the automation doesn't follow, but as soon as I have that selected there, and I make a copy of the event, that the automation, as well as my MIDI CCs, will be carried over. All right, so you see I have more tracks to play bass coming in the way. I'm looking forward to that. All right, great to say Ian Rushmore on a Hangout. Okay, so question, is there a way to trigger different sections of an arranger track or else markers with a MIDI controller for performance purposes? So yeah, we could do this. So it's not the most obvious thing, but it could be done. So we find, I think I have one project kind of set up. So Okay, so if we wanted to be able to trigger the arranger track, so if you're not familiar with the arranger track, what you can do is you can define different sections of the song to play back in kind of a non-linear manner. So as we want to work with this, if we go to so if we wanted to trigger this from MIDI, I'm going to go to my generic remote, and I'll set this to from my Nectar controller. So I'm going to say, this particular MIDI note, and I'll just click on Learn. So I'm going to learn that particular note, and I want to assign this to let's see, command, arranger, and we can say trigger arranger event 1. And now I'll click here on 2. And we're going to choose command, arranger, trigger event 2. And we could do this for a couple of different aspects. So again, I'll just and you could also have these go to specific markers. Okay, so now as we have this open, I could just, then you could just kind of trigger the particular notes. And go directly to your different areas. So try going into your studio setup, and then you could just trigger the different arranger events here. So, and you could also choose to navigate to marker X or to marker 10, marker 9, whatever, kind of in the same methodology. So. You see Pablo is happy that someone does 10 mics for their bass drum. So yeah, I think I've seen Michael Wagner sessions with like about 12 for the kick and 12 for the snare. And, why? Because he can. All right, so we have Greg. Could you please talk through the different snap types in the snap drop-down menu? All right, so let's go ahead. All right, so I'll just move this event kind of out of the way. Okay, so now we could have this set to grid. So I'm going to hit, K or, the letter J rather to set up snap on and off. So now I could have this snap to grid. And right now I could say I want this only to snap to bars. So as I go to move this particular event, it's only going to snap to the bar, and it's not going to start directly at like the beat. So we're bar 107, bar 108. But if I wanted to go to bar 108 beat 2, I would have to switch the snap type here to beat. So now as I do that, I could get directly on the beats like so. So we have grid. Now we could also have grid relative. So let's say my event is, I'll take snap off. Let's say it's a little early on the event. So now if I have this set to snap to grid relative, it's going to be this amount early on the beat or on the bar. So instead of it going directly on, it's always going to be relative to the amount of where it was in position to the beat, but it will just have that automatically keep that same distance between them. All right, now we also have events. So if I want to take this event, this event will just snap to wherever this event is. So not necessarily on a grid, but where the event starts or where it ends, it'll just snap like so. When we go to shuffle, we can now just take this, and let's say I just wanted to flip the order of these two. So this one is first. I could just drag this to the left and their order will flip. So you could just flip like so, and then snap to cursor. So if my cursor is somewhere just kind of in the middle, we can have this automatically, and that will snap to the cursor position. So as we do that, that will just automatically snap directly, not on the grid, but to where the cursor is. So if you're like, this is where the big hit is, and it's slightly ahead of the beat, you could just snap the event to start or the end directly based upon the cursor position. So if I wanted to just move this over. So instead of that just snapping to the grid, it'll now snap directly to the cursor. All right. Okay, so question also, is there a way to force snap to zero crossings to find zero crossings on both left and right channels in a stereo file event? Currently it finds zero crossings in either left or right, but not both simultaneous. So let's take a look, see if we could. Okay. All right, so we have our snap to zero crossing. Now when I go to cut an event, it will just automatically cut on, not necessarily exactly where I cut, but based upon the zero crossing. So let me just take a look at this. And let's say if let's try another cut in the middle here. All right, and I'll just activate zero crossing. That would be helpful. So let's do something a little more amplitude here. So let's say I want to cut. Okay, so right now it's only going to allow me to cut at the zero crossing. Let me see if I could get it not to cut. All right, so it looks like it's so it could depend upon the audio file, and if the audio file is out of phase, I guess it might do that, but you may want to, just out of curiosity, see if it's a phase issue. But if you have a particular file that you want to send to me that could be downloaded, or that you share, I could see where it's only going to make, you don't want the edit to be in two different locations if it's on the same file. But generally, you should make sure the files are in phase, and that's when they could have different zero crossing points, but I guess it could happen naturally as well. But I could pass that along to see if there's a way to do that. But it may be just where, you know, if it's going to be one audio file, that there's going to be one cut for the audio file, and if you needed to break it apart, that if it was causing clicks or pops, that you may just have to go to your project and choose to convert tracks. So you could at this point just, you know, say you're going to take your multi-channel to mono and then be able to do your edits accordingly. All right, so we see from Jesper says, "Hey Greg and everybody else, I don't have any questions today, but I always learn something new anyway. Thanks." All right, so if you don't have any questions and you're learning something new, you have to make sure that you hit the like button. So that's always helpful for us. All right, we have Peter checking in from Montreal. All right. And for people who wanted to learn more information about, you know, different Cubase resources are available kind of when the Hangouts aren't going on. You could check out the Cubase Nation Discord. There's lots of wonderful information on there compiled by Jazz Dude. So we have, hi Greg, question. How do you quantize a lazy, in Dutch we say behind the count beat? Thanks. So if you have, you know, different MIDI data, it may be able to just look for a particular, you know, so there is kind of like different soft quantizing that you could do. So let's say even if I wanted to come over here to the quantize panel, you know, you could set kind of the, you know, so if you, when you start working with, you know, quantization at this point, you know, you could go to a couple of different areas. One of them would also allow you to, as you come over here, is you could set kind of the position. So a lot of times, let's say if I'm doing like a straight eighth note quantization, you could come over here and, you know, check your safe range. So of values like within that you don't want to necessarily, you know, that you'll want within the margin of error, if you will. So you can just kind of say, you know, don't quantize it if it's outside of those particular regions. So you could set a safe range, but you could also, when you come over here, you could go to like your IQ mode. So this is your iterative quantize, and this could be your quantize strength. And you could set this here as well, and that will allow you to kind of say, you know, move it 80% closer to the particular beat or not. So, you know, within the kind of the quantize settings, you have a lot of options for, I guess it would be a lazy feel. Okay. All right. So we have Kyle Kennedy, who's on his lunch break in Hollywood. Thanks for joining us, spending your lunch with us. Okay, so we have a question, guys. Simple question: is it possible, like, I have an audio track which contains some insert effects, but then I want to send the audio signal from this track to whatever, but without the insert effect? So, all right. All right, so let's say if I have a audio track here. So it's just, let me take it off my. All right, so I'll just kind of loop this guitar. Okay, so is it possible I have an audio track which contains some insert effects, but then I want to send this audio signal from this track to whatever, but without the insert effect? I mean, you could always just, one mouse click and duplicate the tracks and remove the inserts on the particular track. So if I wanted to just come here and say, okay, this I wanted to have a distortion on, and then if I choose to right click duplicate the track, that you could just bypass all of the inserts and send that somewhere. But the signal flow will pretty much be, as the signal is coming in, it's going to go through the inserts, the EQs, and you could swap the channel strip and the inserts, channel strip and EQ and inserts. You could swap the order, but then it's going to be sent out afterwards. So I would just duplicate the track and send the one without inserts on, or you could send it to a group and have that group send it to two different groups. So I could say, okay, I want to take this and send a group channel to this one and send a group channel again, and then have your inserts on one of the groups and not the other. So that's another method that you could use as well, Daniel. Okay, so I just see from Kyle, any tips on audio triggering MIDI, something like a MIDI out trigger on an EQ band or compressor? So, something you could do if you want it, and this is often people use this for doing, like drum replacement, but there's other uses for it as well. So I'll just come here. Like, let's say if I wanted to do, I had a MIDI track set up here. So let's say I have a Groove Agent kit. And what I want to do is to take the kick drum from this audio source. So I'll go to my hit points. And I just wanted Cubase to figure out the hit points. We'll do that. And we'll say create MIDI notes. And then we could put it onto we could copy it to the project clipboard or to a new MIDI track or to a selected MIDI track. And once we do our selected MIDI track, it will now just kind of show up, and we could do our drum replacement. So now the kick is just being triggered straight from this instrument. So if I want to come here or tune it, so if you wanted to, if you're looking to do kind of, other tricks, you could just take a particular MIDI source and generate MIDI notes that way, and it just shows up as MIDI notes on a particular part, and then you could trigger that with any MIDI instrument, or use a signal to open up another audio process, whatever you need. I just see a comment from Jeff Sabelski before the FireWire MR816 CSX drivers were installed on my new PC build. The sound was exactly like a shellac record from the 20s with crackles and pops. Yeah. Onboard audio interfaces could be lovely. Okay, just reading through different comments. Some discussion of backups. It's always a good thing. So I just see from 803 Music Group. So are those collapsed MIDI lanes connected to the same instrument? Yeah, they can be. So if you have your different MIDI lanes, they could all be routed to the same instrument. Okay, so I see from Madison Campbell, the stream came up in my recommended. What is this? So we're just, this is a Club Cubase live stream. So we just sit here and answer questions that customers have on Steinberg products, predominantly Cubase, but it could be anything. So we just kind of have the capability of kind of a interactive Q&A session with my son screaming in the background because I think his school's almost over. He's probably just got out of PE, so he's all pumped up. Okay, so I just see not today, but could you go through showing how to set up a multi-output setup using Contact Studio Drummer, 8 outs to Cubase. I have a Focusrite Scarlett, 8 in, 2 out. So I don't have Contact on this computer, but I can show you kind of the same concept. Hang on just one second. I'll talk to my son before he knocks my door down. Bear with me. Okay, so my son's excited. He's done. He's starting his weekend. So if you wanted to do this, with different multiple outputs, I think the principle will be the same. So I could show you inside of, let's say, Groove Agent. So I'll just come over here so you could see all of your outputs that are available for, like, in Groove Agent, just the little drum machine. I could have 32 stereo outs, and depending how it's done, you could, so I could have my kick, and as we look at this, we'll say, okay, here's my kick, and I could choose to route this to my main output. And so let's say when I go to, so I can say, okay, my kick's here. I want to take my snare. I go to output 2. I can take my hi-hat to output 3. This hi-hat to output 4. This kick sample, output 5. Let's say this to output 6. So it's really like how the individual instrument will route these. So I'm not a contact expert, but if they have kind of a live stream, you might be able to ask them or kind of look this up. So now as I come over here and just go through the different drums, you'll see that they're routed to their different outputs. In the mix console. So it should be something very similar in contact, but I'm not a contact expert with that. Okay, so I see a question. I noticed yesterday when I changed tempo, the auto with auto loop enabled, my loop positions change. Is there any way to lock in loop positions in loop mode and musical mode when this happens? All right, so I'll just do a new project here. We'll take a look at it. Okay. Okay, so let's say I have this set for my tempo. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to adjust my tempo down. So as I adjust this, but let's see if I switch my master timeline to seconds and I adjust my tempo. Okay. Okay, so right now when I'm here, we could see that the loop mode is going to be set to bars and beats. And we'll go ahead and I'll just open up a ruler track directly underneath here. And we'll set this to seconds. So as we adjust our tempo down, so we see that this is 8 even bars. So, and we look at our time. And let's start this at 120 beats a minute. All right, and I will set my locator. So we can see that we're going to have, 16 seconds of time. So as I adjust my tempo down, you can see that so when I have bars and beats selected as my primary, so I'm going to come here, and as I adjust my tempo down, we can see that since bars and beats is my primary time display, that my bars and beats as I adjust my tempo down stay the same, but the time changes. But now if I switch my primary time to seconds, and as I adjust the tempo, we can see that it will now adjust based that the bars and beats will change. So try just switching what the actual, not necessarily what is selected here to view, but what the actual time is set to here. So with bars and beats, I adjust the tempo. The events will stay at their bar position, but if I'm in seconds and I adjust the tempo as the master time, we can see that that will adjust accordingly. So try to set your master time format to from tempo, from bars and beats to time. Okay, so we have a question from Jeff Zabelski. Are the project folders exactly the same as saved from Mac or PC? Yes, so there's no difference with the project files. They're completely, they don't care what platform it is. It's the same format, so you could freely open them up without worries. All right. You hear my son dropping stuff above me, probably. All right. All right. Hi, Greg. Can you please show how you would proceed if you wanted to play along with a music video, import it into Cubase, and add a bar count going into it? So 4 counts into the music video. It says start. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. So we'll import a video file. All right, so let's say if I'm here and I wanted 4 beats, so I think you could just come over here and just put in like a pre-roll. So, or like the count in. So I'm just gonna, you'll see this little arrow here. You could just activate count in. So let's say if I wanted to start recording, and then record the audio kind of directly from that. And you could think if we go to your transport, that you could, let's say if we go to your metronome setup, I think we could come over here and say number of bars for count in. So if I want it to be 1 bar, so just make sure that you have the count in activated, and you may have to just check click and count in and click pattern. So now I could just come right here, hit record, I get 4 beats, and then start recording. So all right, so we'll move on. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. And if you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button. And always, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that as well. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. What does the prepare archive function actually do? So when we have the prepare archive function, if we had audio files, let's say that were recorded into different folders, we dragged loops into different folders, and we look at, let's say, our pool window. I'll just see if I could mimic this quickly. So all right, so I have this project, and now I have just a whole slew of loops.
All is love. I knew, remember me. I feel.
All right, so now I look at this particular folder, and we go to our pool window, and now when we look at our pool, we'll notice that these files are going to be in different folders. So you can see different folders here. So now if I do a prepare archive, this will put all of the files into kind of a common folder. So I do prepare archive, and we'll see external files will be copied into the working directory. So this way, if you have audio files that are kind of in 10 different locations they're being used in a project, and then you wanted to just back up your project folder to archive it and play it on a different computer. If you just manually copied the folder over, it wouldn't include the audio files that are not in the pool, that are not in the project folder. So this would kind of copy all the files used for that project to the same common folder, so you could just back up the project folder and not have to worry about missing files. Okay, so I see from Jennifer Carmack, what's your email, please? So you could reach me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. So clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, so question, what presets in Cubase do I use to get the volume of the sound that I want for each instrument? So I'm not sure so if you have for your different instruments, whether it's going to be MIDI or audio, they'll all kind of show up in your mixer. So I'm not sure if it's particular presets. So maybe I'm misunderstanding the question, but anytime that you would add an instrument, it's going to just show up directly inside of the mix console. So if you're mixing, I could come over here, and let's say as we're doing this, I could, if I wanted the guitar to be really loud or soft, or take the drums. So say, okay, I want the bass to be really loud. So, but I'm not sure if it's particular presets, but if it's, you could also use different plugins. If it's, so, if you're coming here, you could run different plugins. Like, we showed kind of doing the maximizer to get more gain at the end. So, you could check out some of the dynamics plugins, like the expanders or maximizers, if that's what you're kind of looking for. So, but if I'm misunderstanding Jesse, just please let me know in the comments. See, great comment from Jazz Dude. I don't get why no one builds an external power supply, then use heavy gauge wires to connect to PC with the heavy duty plugs like 4mm bananas. They can do it in car hi-fi systems, but not computers. That's a great point. You should probably sell that. Okay, so I see, let's see, from Bill G, does Cubase offer a true auto monitoring solution? I find it annoying to have to click the monitor button all the time when I use guitar amp plugins. I want to hear my guitar and what I recorded also. So, it could depend what settings you have in the preferences. So there's an auto monitoring style. So if you go to the preferences here, usually when people ask about any monitoring that it's not working as they think, I tell them to go to VST in the preferences, and you can set the auto monitoring style. So it's, by default, it's set to manual. You could also have it while record is enabled that you are monitoring. So, when record is enabled, you could hear it through the plugins. Or if you only wanted to hear it while it's recording, you could do that. Or tape machine style. So if you're punching in, it'll play back the existing track and then switch to the auto monitoring while it's recording. And then as you do a punch out, it switches the auto monitoring off. So try going to your preferences and under VST, selecting your monitoring. There's 4 different options that you could do there. So it should be that should be able to help you with that. All right, so we just see from Jeff Sabelski saying, now that my new PC build is done, I finally upgraded to Cubase 11 Pro. Oh man, with Spectral Layers Pro and Wavelab Pro, I'm in awe. I just need to get my projects transferred from Mac to PC. Great. Glad your new system, just enjoying it. Okay, so from Fadi says, I have Yamaha PSR SX900 keyboard. How can I connect it to Cubase? Because I found only patches for Genos to be able to record using its voices as MIDI tracks. So once you have, I'm not sure if probably the PSR SX900 probably has a USB out. So for the MIDI communication. So what you want to do is to just add a MIDI track, and then you just need to tell it what particular instrument that it's coming in from. So you can say it's going to all MIDI inputs, and then you just set this out to the PSR or whatever MIDI interface it's connected to. And then that would record the MIDI and send the MIDI information back to your PSR keyboard. And the PSR would generate the sounds. And then many people would combine that with the other sources in a mixer. And if you don't have a mixer, you could take the audio outputs of the PSR keyboard and connect it into inputs of your audio interface and define it as an external instrument. And then that way you could have the audio output. But for external devices, the MIDI is captured in, and the MIDI is sent out to that. It generates the sound, but you don't necessarily have the same flexibility as virtual instruments. So you would, ideally have a mixer to combine the sound of your Cubase with the sounds of your keyboards. Like I still have, not that I use them anymore, but I still have like 23 external tone modules. So I actually have, just looking at my rack, I think 64 channels of mixing, of analog mixing for all my external MIDI gear, so I could hear it. But if you don't have that, if you have an audio interface with 2 ins, 2 outs, you could do that as well. All right, so good to see Jay from Connecticut. He asks his question, does Nuendo have any symphony-focused convolution reverb features aside from what is found in Cubase? So for the musical impulses, they're going to be the same as what's in Cubase, but so we'll show it to you here. But we go to your effects channel. Let's add Reverence, and this is a convolution reverb. And what makes this reverb unique is you could actually load up different samples of different reverbs. Now, as you work in Nuendo, it's going to have the same, kind of typical concert halls that you often see in convolution reverbs, but Nuendo is going to offer more like IR impulses it's going to have more impulses specifically for post-production. So it might have in a car, in this room in an office, so you'll see additional presets in Nuendo of different convolution environments, more geared towards post-production and maybe some game stuff, but more kind of post-production. But for the musical impulses, they'll be identical between Cubase and Nuendo for Reverence. Great to see you on a Hangout, Jay. All right, reading through. All right, my chat field just jumped on me, so. Okay, so I don't think I lost any questions. Again, thanks for all the wonderful questions that people have asked. And if you learned something new, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. All right, just reading through. All right, reading through comments. All right, that's a great discussion that probably happened 45 minutes ago. So just see from Kai, question. I was wondering if it's possible to save your chord progressions in the assistances tool. So I'm not sure what the assistances tool is, but you can take chord progressions from other projects and import them. So one of the functions that you can have here is say, let's go to import tracks from project. So I'll come over here, and I think on this particular project, I may have chord track. So let me just look. Okay, so I can just take the chord track, and then, so I don't necessarily have to do anything special. I could just import a chord track from a different project, and we could have that chord track just show up here. Let's just try that one more time. So it's import tracks from project. So we can see our chord track that's imported here. So, so you could just import it into any other project if you want. So. All right, reading through comments. Okay, so I see from Jeff Zabelski, will Spectra Layers Pro incorporate the CC121 features in the future? I haven't heard of any plans, but I could bring it to their attention to see if it's something that that would make sense. So yeah, I'll mention that to them. That's a great point, Jeff. Okay. So I see question. I got PreSonus IO Station 24C, but it doesn't work with any MIDI learned function. Is there any workaround solution? Because some functions don't work with Cubase, like open edit page. So probably if it's, most of the MIDI controllers, are just kind of transmitting Mackie control. So a lot of them don't actually transmit MIDI themselves. It's kind of the protocol language that they're using. So there's many control surfaces that actually don't transmit, basic MIDI CC messages. So if it's, so if the hardware doesn't do it, there's nothing that Cubase could really do if it's a limitation of the hardware. But if you have to do some functions for editing, if it's running Mackie control, which is probably the most common protocol, you could, if you go to your studio setup, you could have kind of user functions here. So, at this point you could use it to do stuff like, open the edit page and different functions, directly from here. So within the Mackie control protocol, you could just simply have some functions that are user defined that could do particular functions in Cubase. But yeah, it's kind of a shame that so many people miss having MIDI CC control in their controllers. But you could mention it to them to see if they could get it working. See, great comment from Jeff Savelski, just commenting in surround. He's like, I wish everyone could experience sound from an oboist perspective, always sitting in front of the conductor in the middle of the orchestra and play the Rite of Spring. So I used to play in orchestras in college. That's how I used to buy all my MIDI gear, playing in orchestras way back when. So yeah, I miss kind of that whole feeling when the orchestra is on. So okay, so I just see, hi Greg, dynamic EQ please. So yeah, we do have a dynamic EQ. That's the frequency plugin with version 11 was updated for this. So if I wanted to just come over here, we go to the EQ and let's go to frequency. And at this point, if we go to, let's say, band 3, we could adjust this. And as we come right over here, we could just place this into dynamics mode. So at this point, I could adjust my channel dynamics. So I could adjust the dynamics just on this particular band. And we could have, up to 8 an independent side chain on each band that you want. And also if you just wanted to, click right over here, you could just click, also on to switch to dynamic mode for this particular band of EQ. So you could just activate dynamics for each of the bands inside of frequency, or just say, okay, I want to just see my EQ. And now I wanted to activate the dynamics mode for that particular band. So this way we could have a very sophisticated, control of dynamics on very specific frequency ranges. So instead of just being like, at this frequency range, we could adjust the Q and be very surgical with the dynamics processing. So all right, just reading through comments. So all right, so lots of great discussion on Rite of Spring I enjoyed playing that in college too. All right, so glad that Michael Teams has finally made it into the Hangout. He's probably been in for a while, just catching up. So seeing lots of great discussion of, we learned that Jazz Dude is, very appreciative of Stravinsky, but always a Mozart guy. So I like Bach and Schubert. So. All right, we see Michael Teams had our calf this morning. So. Okay, so just see question: is there a way to get some markers at 32 beats? So I'll just do a new project here. Okay, so if you want to do 32 beats, if you're in 4/4 time, you could just come right over here. So we'll just add a marker. And if we jump to measure 9, that would be 32 beats. So, I'm not sure. Maybe I could be misunderstanding a question. So let me know but you could just, so if I'm misunderstanding, let me know. All right, so Jeff Sabelski is saying we have to make music that causes a riot like the Rite of Spring did, and that he'll blame Steinberg for it. All right. Okay, so just probably a further clarification about the pre-count for the video. Says, oops, I wasn't specific enough. I meant set up an actual song video to play along. So get the grid to line up to the tempo of the music and then add the count into that. So, I don't have like a good example of that, but not one that I could play on YouTube, but let me just... So let's say if I wanted to come here, and this would be kind of the same idea, I think. So let's say if we have a tempo detection here. So let's say we have varying tempo. I will just do a tempo detection. All right, and we'll go ahead and listen to it. All right, so, and I wanted to do just a quick grid here. So let's say I want it to be like 4 bars at the downbeat here. So I think if we go to our metronome setup again, so we could use we choose the time signature at the count in. So let's say I wanted to click during count in. So now if I just hit record from that point, let's make sure I have. So, right, so I'll just... Okay, so I think we get, let's see if we get this. And it could be just because of how this is, I may have to give it a little more buffer space at the beginning. Give me... Okay, and... All right, so say this is going to be our downbeat, and here we'll have even pickup notes. All right, so it could be just, so, once you kind of do this, then, should, let's say if it does 1 bar, because it may do it as a 1/4 measure. All right. But I don't really have a good example, but if you want to send me an example, of a file, or send me a link to something on YouTube, I could probably get it lined up pretty easily for the video. All right, see a nice comment from Robert. Just want to thank you, Greg, for generally being awesome in every one of these explanation videos. I'm glad it's helpful. All right, so I just see a question. What do I need for Zoom meetings? So we'll meet tomorrow at noon U.S. Eastern time, so check to see if there's daylight saving time differences. But if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I could send you the invite, and I'll also try to put it in the comments of this video tonight when I do the summary, the index. I know some people, I've gotten a number of requests for the meeting during our hangout. Right, Agent K wants people to hit the like button. So let me just scroll back. My chat field jumped on me. All right, so question, which plugin you recommend to use for getting power chord effect, distortion, and mix it? So I like the VST amp rack quite a bit. So I'll show you kind of just, let me see if it's still in my recent files list. Yeah. So one of my friends, my dear friend Fred Corey, gave me this track for demo purposes, which is, which I'm totally, grateful for. But, and he heard me use it in a demo. He's like, what did you do to the guitars to make it sound better? And he was like smart enough to record just a dry guitar part. So I took the DI part and ran it through the VST amp rack here. So let's say if I want like this kind of typical. I know have that plugin open, and so we have kind of the two amp racks, and now what we can do is just so this is the dry guitar, and now we go through on one side and the other side. And again, in context. And we bypass those. So that's the direct guitar. And listen to that in context. I got no control, hit the road, gonna rock, gonna roll, and I'm go, hit the road, gonna rock, gonna roll, we got no control, hit the road. So at this rate, you know, you're gonna have a series of different amplifiers that look mysteriously and sound mysteriously like classic amps, you know, like, oh, you know, this one may look like, you know, an amp that was used by, you know, a particular British band that was quite popular, or, you know, the classic, you know, different types of amplifiers. These are very reminiscent of the tones and sounds. So check out the VST amp rack. And if you're doing stuff for bass, the VST bass amp is great. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so we just see, hi Greg, a quick walkthrough of Supervision, please. Okay. Let me see if I can find a quick project to show it on. Okay, so Supervision is a new metering plugin that comes with Cubase 11 and Nuendo 11. So let's say we'll just kind of play this a little bit here. And Supervision is really kind of a dedicated metering tool. So we get to kind of start off with just like level meters, and these could all be resized as well. But we could have up to, I think, 19 different meters or 18 meters, and we can see 9 at a time. You could also see this is like a loudness meter, spectrum curve, and what's kind of cool is as you hover over, you could see the particular frequencies, just like that. Or if you want to see a spectrum bar, and again, you could just right click to take a snapshot and pause it. If you want to see spectrum intensity, so the brighter the color, the more intensity there is in the spectrums. If you want to see a spectrogram, and each of these will generally have like a little setting, so if you wanted to adjust the duration to be longer. One of my blind mastering engineer friends, this is kind of how he sees audio and how he perceives audio. So, and if you want to see like a chromogram, which is kind of a different perspective of that, your stereo phase scope. And again, if you want to go to the settings, we could come over here and say, okay, let's make this dots or an envelope. We could also zoom in and out. So some good late night fun. You could also just see panorama, where the panning information is going on particular tracks. Kind of a multi-panorama, so kind of frequency based where the panning is strong. correlation. So you can see to make sure that you want this kind of hovering around here. Also a multi-correlation, so we can see where if we see lines that are kind of in the red here, these are frequencies that are kind of out of phase, where you can kind of see that on a particular phase channel. We also have surround and ambisonics. We could see oscilloscope. And again, you could adjust kind of the frequency of this. A wave scope, so you could actually kind of get an idea what the amplitude looks like, even if the file hasn't been created yet. A wave circle, that just looks cool. And you could also have like a time meter, and you could choose each of these to be on different aspects. So I created a couple presets here. So I made one that's just this is what I have in my control room view. And you could also just come over here and see some of the additional meters. So you can have up to 9 meters at once going on. So for a lot of people that will have, lots, I still see like a lot of my old school engineer friends that have a phase scope and like a spectrum meter constantly sitting on top of their console that they look at constantly when they're working, as they're tracking, as they're mixing. But these types of things are just all available within the Supervision plugin, so that you could come over and just be able to kind of see all of these different things. And again, it's a part of Cubase, so you could just have everything laid out. You could reposition it how you want and see like an incredible amount of information without having to, get hardware meters, which can cost more than your computer, and have these be, accurate and be able to choose kind of, different aspects of where they're actually coming from. So if I just want to see the middle side of this, so if I want to see what the sides are looking like on this, or what the middle part of the panning spectrum is, or just the left channel, you could pick different areas to work with. So all that control that you could just have. So we see a lot of people are now just buying a dedicated monitor just to have Supervision up and running all the time. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. And we'll just, all right, so we see question. Hi, I'm new to Cubase, and when I'm on a new track, the buttons to arm, track, and freeze, etc. is there, but it shows blank, so I can't record stuff. Is it because of memory? So often, if I add a track, so I'll just go ahead and add a particular track here, and so we can see that arm. And yes, we'll have those particular functions, but make sure that you actually have an input defined. If there's no input defined, like when the track was added, or if it's an input that's not connected to a particular audio interface input in the input channels here, it may show up as where you can't arm the track for record. But as soon as a valid input is selected, at this point I could just say, okay, I just want it this input, and now I could record enable the track. So I would just check to make sure that the routing for the input is set correctly. Okay, so just see from Douglas, running my Modi X as an external instrument seemed to have let up some latency, CPU stress, recording multiple tracks. Thanks for the review last week, Greg. You're welcome. Glad it worked out. Thanks for letting us know. Always nice to be able to help people. right. All right, so I just see a comment from Pablo. It'd be interesting if you could just compress that frequency without having to equalize. And I think this is probably in relation to the supervision or to the frequency. So as soon as we come over here, so we have to define the particular frequency range. So let's say if we don't, if I have my frequency set here, we could probably still go to the dynamics. Let's see if we could switch over. So you could still do it without EQing it, but kind of the beauty of the dynamic EQ is to, be able to kind of have the Q factor, or how wide or narrow that particular EQ is to do the processing. So if you wanted that to only be at those particular frequency points, you could do that, or you could do that quite easily using like the multi-band compressor as well. Okay, so we have a question. I have my audio feedback enabled, yet I'm unable to hear when mixing in Very Audio. Could you please tell me how to fix that issue? All right, so let's say if I come over here, I think we have some vocals here. So let's say, all right. Okay, so it could be that you need to also be running the control room. So let's say if I'm here and I wanted to now go into Very Audio. Okay. And if the control room is, let's go to my audio connections, and I'll go just to my control room and I'll have that not connected, and I go to my outputs. This is another thing that goes through the listen bus, like we discussed a little bit earlier. So if we have the listen on, so now as I would move particular notes, we don't hear that. But if we go to our control room, so make sure if you go to your audio connections that we have that set to not connected. We come over here to our control room, and so now I should be able to just hear the notes as I move them like that. So make sure that you have the control room enabled. Okay, so I see Kai's kind of clarifying for a point I misunderstood earlier. Says I meant to say the chord assistance tool, so you can save your own chord progressions for other projects. So yeah, but again, you could always, anything that you have in a chord, the chord assistant can be, based on, any project. You could open up the chord assistant, and, it's not really tied to a particular chord, and the suggestions I will give you is often based on the chords that are in the particular project. And if you have the chords in the project, you could just simply import them from the tracks from projects function. Okay, so from Justin Gambino, so while you're live, I guess I'll ask a dumb question on a chord track. Can you set it to numbers? So like 1 chord, 5 chord, 4 chord, new to Cubase. Just saw the chord track and it was something I wondered. So it's not really set up to do like Roman numerals or Nashville numbers. The chord editing functionality inside of Dorico, Steinberg's notation solution, that could do Nashville numbers, but I don't believe it does Roman numerals yet. I don't think it does. There may be a way to work it. but it's going to be the actual chords and not based upon the key where you have like the 1, 4, or 5. So, all right. So Michael Agent K wants everyone to hit the like button if you haven't done that. Okay. So you just see from Uno Memento. Sorry, didn't get it. When is the next Zoom meeting? So it'll be tomorrow, starting at 1 or at noon U.S. Eastern time. And if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I could send you a link, or I'll put the link in the index. So if you look at the video tomorrow morning or later tonight, I should have the link posted in there if it'll allow me to post it. But please email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, and I know that the link will be sent via email to you. And I know I've gotten some requests during the Hangout, and I haven't had time to respond. Okay, we're doing well on time. Right. Okay, reading through different comments and questions. All right. Okay, just my chat field jumped on me, so. Okay, so I just see from question. Okay, so just to clarify, you can do tempo detection from a music video, or would I have to find its audio track and import that into Cubase as well? So by default, when you import a video track into Cubase, it's going to extract the audio track. You could also just come right here and import audio from video file, import the audio from the video file, or just choose to import the video file, and that will extract the audio track, and you can do a tempo detection on that audio track. All right, so from Jay, could you please demonstrate import of impulse responses into Reverence due to specificity? I truly understand if you don't have an IR file prepared. So, yeah, so to do this, we would just, let's say, add an effects channel track. It's like really easy to do. So we'll have our Reverence. And you're correct in assuming I don't have an IR impulse, but you could just click right here on import, and it will just look for a WAV file. And then that would be just the basis for the convolution reverb. So just, again, once you have Reverence opened up, click on import, and then just scroll through. And there's lots of, impulses freely available online as well. All right, read through. All right, so we see John Costigan just got his Townsend Sphere 22 mic system. It says Itney Apollo Twin will model more than 32 mics even after you record the tracks, one for front, one facing away, 2 channels always needed. Stay tuned. So yeah, if you're on the Zoom session tomorrow, you could tell us about it. Let's see, great comment from Pablo. Supervision is very useful to keep clients entertained while you teach them the session. So it's always about eye candy. So, okay, question. Hi, Greg. I'm having a problem of sound skipping that I suspect is coming from my UR242. I reinstalled everything and made sure all drives are up to date, but it still happens. Any advice? So yeah, I run everything kind of on a very similar interface. It's a UR24C. So if you have like sound skipping or stuff like that, the first thing I would look at is to just select the audio system here and select the interface and go to the control panel and try to just increase the buffer size. So if you have that kind of cranked up really low, I would try, if you're at 128 or 64, just try, going to 256 or 512 and see if that makes a difference for you. So once again, let's go to your studio menu, to studio setup. Sorry, we have construction work going on next door. So, all right. And so just come right over here and just go to the Cubase panel, and go to the control panel for the interface. And raise the buffer size. All right. Sorry for the noise outside. Hang on just one second. I'll see if maybe... Okay, sounds like the noise is maybe stopped. So, all right. Let me just see if I could make sure it's not a vacuum cleaner or something upstairs. Bear with me just a second. All right, I'm back. Sorry for the interruption. All right, so we have a question. Please, can you tell me why mute presend when mute button doesn't work when it's unticked, please, for monitoring sidechain inputs whilst soloing a track? Okay. Haven't tried this function in a long time, so let me just... Okay, so I have a little sidechain scenario in this project. Okay, so let me just get sidechain set up. Okay, so I'm just going to look for mute presend when mute button. Okay. just see if it's see if I can remember where this function is. Just see if it's in the mix console. Okay, so let me just see if I can find this. If not, I may have to move on. Sorry about that. But maybe if you could. It's from Jeff Choate. Okay, no, sorry, from Kieran. So why mute presend when mute button doesn't work? All right. Sorry, I'm having a brain cramp on this. Yeah, so Karen, if you could, if you want to send me an email, we could go over it next time if you want. And if you could send me just where the mute presend when mute button, or if you so I see you want to do it whilst soloing a track, but I may be able to come up with other ways to kind of get what you want to accomplish. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'll move on. Maybe we'll be able to catch Kieran's question a little later, or I might remember. Sorry. Okay, so we have, hi Greg, I'm running Cubase 11 Pro. Can you please tell me how to set up for dynamics and score editor, things like crescendo and slurs? Okay. Okay, I'll just show. I'll just do a new project here quickly. Okay, so I will just quickly. All right, so let's say I'll try to give him a melody for Gareth here. And to honor Jeff Zabelski, which probably every instrument sounds great except for your own instrument sample wise. All right, so since we had discussion of oboe. Okay. Okay, so let's say I'll just kind of do a quick, since I play horribly, I'll just do a quick step entry. All right, so let's say we want to look at this in our score editor, and I'll just do a quick clean up. All right, and I'll look at this in page view. Okay, so let's say I have my little melody, and we'll just kind of play along here. So. Okay, so if we wanted to just... All right, so let's say if I wanted to now just put in, so if you go to dynamics mapping, at this point I could just put in your dynamics mapping, and you could have, let's see if I remember how to do this. If we, so say if I put in piano there, then I want to say if we just, I'm trying to remember what the keyboard shortcut is, if it's, all right, so if we put these in, but I think if we do our dynamics mapping, that we should be, I think there's a way to have this. Let me just, but there is a way to kind of put the values in for this node. I'm just kind of blanking on it. Let me just, but you'd use kind of the dynamics mapping. I thought it was, just to double click on it. Let me just see. Yeah, it's usually, let me just see if I maybe go into my right zone editor. Maybe it changed with 11. All right, so say if I put in my dynamics here. So this might have changed in 11, but I could be just doing it wrong. But I know that there's a way with the dynamics mapping. Let me see if I could find it really quick. Bear with me just a second. Okay, so let me see if I right click. Okay, so if I right click on the symbol here, we could say choose your dynamics. Here we go. Okay, sorry about that. My brain cramp. Okay, so at this point, you could say, you know, as we do our crescendos, that we could say, so I'm going to right click, let's open, let's do our dynamics mapping. And we could say that when we want to do CC7 for send controller, so you could just now have that send MIDI CC7 as it plays. So if we do this right, just come here. So that's what you want to do is to just kind of right click on the settings, and then you could say you just wanted to send volume, or you could adjust the volume or controllers of like, you know, so as you put in like a forte here, so, and you could now just kind of come right over here to the dynamics mapping and adjust kind of the controls. So one other question we had from kind of that I got mailed in was the capability of coming up with like a consolidated rest. So let's say if I had just a part and I didn't want to, I'll just extend this out. So when we look at this in our score editor, if I didn't want to print out like tons and tons of blank pages of rest, so how to do that? So if we go to your score settings, and then let's go to your layout tab. Here you can see your multi-bar rest, and we can say every 4 measures of rest. If it's above 4 measures, it'll now just kind of print out. And now we'll do kind of the consolidated rest. You don't have to print out 21 measures of rest, which is super annoying for most people. Okay. All right. So we're doing well on time. We have a couple more, we have about 20 more minutes. My chat field just jumped on me. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. If you learned something, make sure you hit the like button. So see a question. If you were just getting started with Cubase and moving from composing, arranging into mixing, how would you set up your faders and what scale would you use? So a lot of times, you know, if I was just kind of starting off, you know, I would just, you know, just for the metering scale. So say if I want to do something, let me just see if I have piece I was thinking. So I was doing something more composer-ish. Let me see. Okay, so I'll just do this one. Okay, so let's say if I have, so something that's a kind of more composition, it's been arranged. So, you know, most people, you know, just if you're going for like your different meters, like for your master meters, if that's kind of what you mean, you know, any number, any of the meters is good as long as you kind of know what to look for. A lot of people doing kind of more dynamic classical stuff kind of prefer the CAT System 20. That's, you know, but the default digital scale works. And, you know, just kind of, you know, if you're doing arranging, you know, think of the conductor as the mixer, you know, and you just have the options as you're working, you know, to bring in different parts. And if you think of it like conducting, you know, so I want to take, you know, so you could just bring in your different elements to taste. And, you know, and the beauty of this is if it's, and you could also apply EQs, which is volumes and particular frequencies. So we're just kind of adding volume in that particular frequency range. So, you know, I just kind of think of it like, you know, you're conducting, and this is you're conducting via a mixing console. And, you know, while the mixer doesn't bring people in on time, you could control all their dynamics and make sure the blend is really good. And once you kind of think of it probably like that, it'll make a lot more sense. So, you know, you could do your different meters here. So, you know, CAT System 20 is a really good meter. You know, the default digital scale, just to make sure that you're not clipping over 0 dB, and depending on what you're delivering for, to make sure that your loudness meter is kind of in line as well. So for a lot of stuff, for if you're doing for broadcast, or you know, you might want to aim for -23 loudness units. And if you're doing something more for that's going to be released on Spotify or CD, aim for like -14. You know, but once you kind of do that, you'll get a good sense and load up, you know, just import different CDs. You know, you could take a CD or take an MP3 of a file and, you know, just kind of listen to it, something you're familiar with, something that you may want to emulate, and get a sense of what it's doing on the meters. And, you know, emulate the good things that you like and stay away from the bad things that you don't like. Okay, so you see, hi Greg, for once I caught you live. Do you have any idea whether Steinberg will ever fix the focus issue in Windows? So I'm not sure which particular focus issue it is. So maybe if you want to send me an email, I'd be happy to kind of see, you know, I'm not sure if it's like a Windows thing, you know, if I open up a different window that, you know, something else becomes in focus, or if it's a focus issue between different applications. But if you could let me know, that would be helpful, and I could see if I could get it sorted out for you, if there's any tips or tricks with that. Okay. All right, so I just see a question, Greg. Why did they stop the CC121 controller? Anything going to replace it? So the CC121 controller is still in the market. So it's just it's been kind of out of inventory for some of the parts needed, because of supply chain disruptions with COVID. But it's we just got a shipment and shipped them out in the U.S. Just last month. So it's still being made. So. Okay, so I know we had a question that was sent in, so let's go ahead and get to that. Thank you. Thanks again for all the wonderful questions. Okay, so a question. I inserted a third-party tuner for my stringed instruments, my stereo out. That's my last channel before master output. Is there any way to assign a key command to a specific plugin like this tuner, as it is my most frequently used plugin during tracking? So I'm not sure if it's a key command that could be done. Let's take a look. I don't think it could be maybe called up with a key command, but maybe from a Midi message. So I'll just take a... So, but let's, yeah, so I don't think it's a key command, but I think if we have, let me just try to set it up, a tuner on my master out. Okay, and if I wanted to see if I could access that through a MIDI message, I'll come over here. Let's go to our generic remote, and I'll say our note on message. So I'll just learn this particular note. And I wanted to go to mixer, stereo out, and insert one, tuner edit. All right, so I'll hit apply. And now when I come here, I just hold down the key, and that will just bring the tuner plugin up that's on the master channel, just like that. Okay, so question. I transferred my Cubase project version 1.2 to a drummer. Meanwhile, I keep on working on the same project and changed quite a bit of the arrangement. So how to get his recorded drums in my project being meanwhile at the state of version 1.5, and how does he implement my version 1.5 into the older version of 1.2 of the same song that he already worked on? So you could please discuss how to cooperate with others within this same evolving Cubase project. The best thing is to try to have, I realize it's not possible at all times, but try to have maybe the structure defined when possible. It could also be that, you may, if you're working with different takes of different things, something that could be helpful is... Let's say I wanted to take all of these tracks here. So I'm going to take just all of my different tracks, and I could come right over here and say new version. And I could have the drummers take as, a version, and then I could just switch back and forth to my version. So you could maybe use track versions, and these would allow you to have kind of the same tracks but alternate versions or performances, and then be able to kind of switch back and forth. So try just selecting them all, And then you could just say, okay, we want to do new version, and then you could have everything loaded in, and then you could edit the two different versions together as needed. All right, so we got through the other questions that were submitted during the Hangout. See how we're doing on time. All right, so we got maybe 5 or 6 minutes left. Thanks again for all the wonderful questions. Okay, so we have a question. How do we see the articulations that we add in the controller lane? Show the colors we set in the expression map. My articulation is defined as directions. Don't show the color assigned in the map. All right, so let's go ahead and so I'll come over here and let's just move this to okay, so we can see our articulations and dynamics. So let's take this. I think we should we'll import our key switches here. Okay, so let's say if I just want to throw in some all right, so let's say if I go to legato, yeah, so I'm not sure why it's not doing that, but I could do some, I could play around with it a little bit over the weekend. If you want to email me, and I could maybe see if I could have a better answer for Tuesday's live stream. Okay. Okay, so I see sometimes when I save a VST plugin as a preset, the name doesn't show up in the plugin window. Any ideas on this? So I'm not sure if it's a plugin within the preset. So, but sometimes it may, like if you go to the media bay here, so sometimes if you go to user presets and then look for, your like instrument presets, so sometimes it could, get, you may be able to find your user defined presets by going to the user defined presets in the media bay first to kind of start off, and then, but it could also be that media bay, sometimes after you create something, it usually does a pretty good job of kind of auto scanning the folders, but maybe just within that like user content, you could say, okay, I wanted to go to, effects chain presets and maybe just choose to rescan. And, so maybe just it hasn't rescanned the media bay to catch the new addition. So there's a couple things that I would use. I would check out. We see Gareth is asking if he missed the other Backbone giveaway. So yeah, we gave away 3 copies today, Gareth, but you had to be early. So just kidding. All right. See Gareth warning me not to go though. It's a ghost that's making the noise. All right. All right, so people want me to sample the noise of the construction and turn it into pad shop sounds. I've done some stuff like that playing around, so it's kind of fun. We had a new house being built right outside my window during the summer. right. So we're just saying that, that the from it says but just about the CC 121 being hard to find. So I know that there was a production run recently of them from Yamaha in Japan. So there may be some more kind of coming in. So I see Jeff Zabelski says he lived near the Burbank airport. So again, he had all sorts of noise from that. So yeah, I have a friend whose studio is in the flight path for Burbank airport at Third Encore. So I see, is there a control CC for the control room level? So I think if you go to your studio setup and in here, you could just go directly to set a mixer. If you go to VST control room, and now you could just say control room, and I think there's a level in here that you could adjust. So your volume level, so you could use a MIDI CC map through the generic remote for that. All right, we've got just about out of time. So I see that there's a question from Kieran. So I'll look for that location. We'll discuss that preference under the next hangout on Tuesday. So maybe an hour off on Tuesday, because in the US we're going through daylight saving time. So everyone check your time. That may be throwing off some start times with people. Please email me for the start of for the Zoom meeting info, and we'll see everyone on Tuesday. Thank you for all the wonderful questions, and we'll talk to you guys later. Hope to see you guys tomorrow on the Zoom meetup. Take care. Bye.